If you want to know something about yourself, sit on your bed one night and say to yourself, you got to mean this. Like, you got to be desperate. This is no game, this. It's like, my life is not everything I want it to be, and perhaps it's not everything that I need it to be. And by need, I mean my life is so unbearable that the suffering that's attendant upon that is make me nihilistic, cynical, bitter, resentful, homicidal, genocidal, unable to have a good relationship, prone to punish people for their virtues because of my jealousy, driving the proclivity to see evil everywhere except within my own heart. Like, these are problems, man. And you ask yourself, you sit on the bed and say, okay, man, I'm ready to learn something. Like, what's one thing I'm doing wrong that I know I'm doing wrong, that I could fix, that I would fix? It's like, you meditate on that, you'll get an answer. And it won't be one you want, but it'll be the necessary one. You know, and it's often something that will point you to small things. So Carl Jung said, people in the modern world don't see God because they don't look low enough. And so imagine you're in your messy bedroom, you know, and you're sitting on the edge of the bed trying to have an honest dialogue with yourself. And the little voice says, you know, it's pretty disgusting in here. And you think, well, I'm way above such trivial niceties as organizing my room. It's like, well, that's pride. That's arrogance. If you're above organizing what's actually yours, how in the world are you ever going to organize anything else? And so you get on your knees and you think, well, it's time to, you know, take a brush to the toilet. And maybe that's where you start. And that works. Like, that works. You start making those micro improvements, like real micro improvements, real on the ground, actual micro improvements to things you know that are wrong, you'll improve unbelievably rapidly.
How is it that discipline and the straight and narrow offer the best chance for a good life? And how is it that we have forgotten that is the case?
Well, the reason that discipline is necessary is because you're a mass of competing short-term interests. And so the question is then, well, which short-term interest should win out? And the answer to that is, well, none of them. They need to be organized into a hierarchy that makes them functional across time and across individuals. So like a 2-year-old is very likely to act out his or her proximal impulse. But of course, a 2-year-old can't survive in the world. You have to bring your primary instincts, let's say, under the regulatory structure of a higher order value system that allows them to manifest themselves without undue mutual sacrifice across large spans of time in the presence of large numbers of other people. So that requires a very sophisticated ordering. It's like, we already talked about the fact that a meta-narrative is necessary to unite subcultures, say, so that they can operate peacefully and harmoniously within the same space. The same thing applies within you, because you're an internal coalition of warring single-minded tribes, and they have to all be brought under the organizational structure of long-term collective vision, let's say. Mm-hmm. And in order to do that, you have to be disciplined. And any discipline, technically speaking, is an attempt to bring all those competing short-term impulses under a larger scale and more inclusive framework. And so you do that, and then, well, that's actually what gives you freedom. Being impulsive and being free aren't the same things, because if you're impulsive, you're just the slave of your impulses.
Right.
There's no freedom in that. That's the same freedom, so to speak, literally, that a 2-year-old has, because a 2-year-old isn't socialized yet. So it's a completely, that doesn't function in the sophisticated world. It doesn't work.
Right.
Everyone knows it.
The goal of life is to live a life which in retrospect we are glad that we lived. It's important to give ourselves perspective, to develop that metacognizance, to step away from the urgent, to step away from the phenomenological day-to-day existence, because the present self is a petulant child. It's lazy and it wants the path of least resistance and that glass of wine and that new movie on Netflix and the couch looks really comfortable. Very rarely does it do...
Yeah, well, that's the danger with impulsive happiness, is that it does have that present-bound quality.
And in retrospect, that can lead to a life that's not well lived.
Generally, yes. Life definitely places philosophical demands on you, whether you want it to or not. And so it is useful to step back. And that's likely why the trait openness evolved. That's the creativity dimension. That's the dimension that allows people to engage in philosophical discourse and to think laterally. And it does allow you to step back and look at things on a broader scale and to generate creative alternatives. The problem with examining your assumptions is it's very disquieting, because you want things to act the way you predict and desire them to act. And you work within a set of axioms and you act them out in order to maintain that predictability, that desirable predictability. If you mess around, the more fundamental the axiom that you question, the more uncertainty you release. And some of that can be positive, but plenty of it can be anxiety provoking. I mean, just imagine that you're in a relationship and it's maybe a year into it and you haven't formalized and finalized it, but then one day you allow yourself to ask the question, is this the relationship I want to be in? Well, that's a fundamental question, but just imagine now you're destabilizing your entire future. You're destabilizing your present. You're destabilizing your past, because while engaging in the relationship, you're acting out the assumption that it's the proper relationship. But now you question that. That means the story you told yourself about what was happening while it happened, even though it's already happened, was wrong and something else had happened. And then you have to think through what actually happened. So it's unbelievably demanding. And the more axiomatic the assumption, the more certainty is cast into troublesome chaos. Now, you could say, yeah, but the alternative is worse. And I believe that often that's true, but the thing about the alternative is that you can always forestall it, right?
Mañana.
Ask that question tomorrow. You bet. And it's a very powerful temptation, and no wonder. Do you want to dig up the body now, or do you want to wait a month? It's like, well, it'll be more rotten in a month, but it's not a month. It's not now, right? It's not now. And so I understand why people don't want to delve into things, even if their emotions indicate that they should. I mean, I would see this all the time. If you're trying to settle an important issue with your partner, let's say, that can be a tremendously troublesome excavation process. And there's no shortage of pain. But if you sort it out, then maybe things can be better. Doesn't mean it's easy or pleasant. Quite the contrary. It's like surgery. It's like surgery to remove something, that shouldn't be there. It's necessary, but man, it's still surgery. My father gave me an abiding, and then the other thing I should say about him is he spent a tremendous amount of time with me when I was very young. Say before I was 5 or 6. He taught me to read. He did that every night for months, and I remember that very vividly, and instilled in me a love of books and a fluency in reading. He believed that I could do what I set my mind to. And he really believed that. And to have someone that believe that of you, that's something, man. And, it was something that I wanted to offer to my clinical clients. Because I did believe that there was more to them than the suffering person that was sitting there, and that, with joint diligent effort, we could sift our way through the chaff and find the wheat, and that things could be better. And one of the lovely things about practicing as a clinician was that almost inevitably happened, and sometimes really radically. And then, of course, later it started to happen on a broader scale, and I was seeing that happen in the lives of maybe thousands of people.